The official title of this workshop is Social and Environmental Justice in Agriculture. No? So I'm asking the panelists for them to continue the presentation they did earlier at noon, but to give it a twist in their approach and taking into account the social justice and the environmental justice component of the work that they are going to be presenting on. So just to give it a different taste, no? We're going to be doing this for an hour and a half. So we will have presentations for 15 minutes each, and we will hopefully that will give us enough time to be able to engage in a quick Q&A session towards the end of it. So no further ado, we're going at it real quick, no? I am Nelson Carrasquillo. I am the General Coordinator of CATA, the Farmworker Support Committee, and I am a board member of Beyond Pesticides. And I'm going to be facilitating the workshop at this time. We want to begin today with Tirso Moreno in terms of for him to expand on the work that he presented earlier today. Tirso is the General Coordinator of the Farmworker Association and co-founder of them way back in the 80s, in 1982. He was born in Mexico and came to this country in 1971 with his family, migrating from Florida to Michigan, working on the apples and citrus. He began working as an organizer for the UFW in 1983, and when he and several other farm workers in Central Florida initiated the Farmworker Association. So he's well known nationally, but more important, well grounded in the community where he's from here in Central Florida. So Tirso.
I was a worker under contract. I was not necessarily an organizer, and I became the president of the local in Apopka under the contract between Coke or Minute Maid and United Farmworkers of America. So I was a fruit and vegetable picker, a migrant farm worker for 13 consecutive years in the U.S. And out of that is when I started founding co-founding the Farmworker Association of Central Florida. Was at that time. We started small and then we expanded to a statewide organization. We had built up an organization, a statewide organization with chapters. That had not been an easy thing, but it's possible, and we got it done. We also are multi-issue, which also is not the way it's done usually. And we work in some of the most pressing issues that affect the farm workers, and the organization has changed it according to what's the reality and the priorities and the needs and for farm workers. At the present time, we are not only working on pesticides related issues, but we are also at the far front organizing the farm workers as immigrants, on the rise of the immigrants, which also makes them much more vulnerable than in the beginning when we started. We also doing work related to other needs for the farm workers. Traditionally, the Farmworkers Organization has focused on organizing the farmworkers around, yes, improving the working conditions as workers, but not to see other ways to improve things for them. And we have been working on, some actual changes that have been happening among the farm workers. Some of the migrant farm workers have been moving in from being farm workers to become small producers. And also, they're also looking at ways to move into the new kind of production. So that it's another thing that we has taken different than other farm workers organizations. And of course, building collaboration between the small producers and the farm workers. That we see it as a need at the present. Well, it has been a need for decades. We also at the present time doing some work in the rural communities to support the farm workers to get organized around growing their own food, which has not been done in the past. So we have community gardens and rural communities. So it's another new thing for us, and we are at the far front in Florida doing that, at least in the rural communities. Have not. That was something was not happening. The focus was more in urban communities. We believe that the migrant farm workers have knowledge and are bringing in tradition to the U.S., and that can be, it not only can help them to have access to better, healthier food, but also that can also serve the needs of the society, of the actual tendency of the society of looking for better, healthier organic food or sustainable. So those are the things where we get in. And related to the exposure to pesticides, problems, and the need to improve the working condition, we have done a lot of work, as I say before, training the farm workers, to recognize to understand the problem or to recognize the problem of exposure and symptoms, and also to learn about their rights and to get organized, to get involved in the changes and the changes needed to change the practices, as well as also to get involved in changing policies. For us, policies is the same thing, but we think it's not only changing the laws, because the problem of enforcement is a huge, big problem in the fields, in Florida as well as in other states. We had done a lot of work and produced changes. We changed practices and policies. Practices not only to make changes on the workers taking care of themselves better in different ways, but also to change the employers. We had done work, and the employers in Florida had been changing. We get into also other issues that are not only pesticides exposure, because working conditions, one of the biggest problems is the pesticides exposure, but also practices on the fields, harvesting in the fields has not changed through the years. We still do farm work the same way I used to do it when I was a farm worker, and that has been a long time ago. Same tools, same kind of ways, and that is affecting the health and the lives of the farm workers, them and their families. So a lot of work we had done also, and this, I know this conference has been focused on the food producers, on the farm workers who work and fruits and vegetables and other kinds of food. We also have in Florida the largest production of ornamental products, ferns, plants. It's big in Florida. A lot of the well, not a lot of the work, but most of the workers on that part of the industry are women, and women has been, women are more vulnerable to the pesticides effects for a lot of different reasons. So we had done a lot of work to do research related to women exposure and collaboration, of course, with education institutions, with universities, and of course we came up with training specialized for women, and we also came up with ways, to make changes, again, change practices as well as policies. And so we had done that, as well as with the farm workers, as well as with the farm workers on fruits and vegetables, especially on citrus. We had done a study to look for ways to solve some of the biggest health and safety problems for citrus pickers. And on the ornamental industry, of course, also had done some studies and some changes. Our trainings include, of course, not only issues of health and safety related to pesticides exposure, but also include trainings and how to deal with other health and safety problems. We are, in a way, part and in support with Agricultural Justice Project. We are also trained to do inspections, and we had done that and train and certify. So we are part, in a way, to Agricultural Justice Project. We're also affiliated to the Domestic Fair Trial Association, which is, it's a joint effort with Agricultural Justice Project. We had done collaboration with other organizations, looking for solutions to the problems of the farm workers. We are also part of, we have built up a statewide organization among farm workers organizations. Right now we have we're 4 members in Florida. That was done with the purpose of dealing with need for changes on policies at the statewide level. That also has been a big accomplishment. Again, issues that affect farm workers on health and safety or workplaces, as well as immigrants issues and other issues in the family that affect the families. At the worldwide, not national only, but worldwide level, we're part of La Via Campesina, and in that we are, kind of dealing with other issues. I mean, pretty much, La Via Campesina focuses on rural communities, and the members, we have 200 million members worldwide. And La Via Campesina deal with issues affecting, of course, small farmers, farm workers, immigrants, and other issues affecting the rural communities. And La Via Campesina, under the Via Campesina, we do deal with not only pesticide issues, but other issues that are actually affecting the quality of food for the consumers, such as the GMOs, and also dealing with things, the use of chemicals damaging the environment and the need for changing the industrialized corporate kind of agriculture, as well as the conventional way of production. So that's what I can say. Of course, we're very proud that we develop I would say a culture, a building collaboration, as I said before, with and making alliances with other organizations and other interested parties that are not necessarily the kind of usual kind of collaboration. I said before, organizations that do not have the same philosophy we do have, we have been able to join forces with them, which is kind of unusual. It's not easy. So we're very proud of that too. And get into some grounds that nobody ever tried before. And we understand why people just take one issue and just focus on something, because it's not easy, it's difficult. And I mean, that's what I can tell you. If I have any extra time and you have any questions, Mel, well, maybe we can use that time that way. Thanks. Gracias.
Our next speaker is Margaret Reeves. She's a senior scientist at the Pesticides Action Network, and before joining PAN in 1996, Margaret spent most of her 9 years in Central America teaching and conducting research in tropical agricultural ecology. She worked with university college and NGOs to improve productivity on low-input, ecological sound agricultural methods, and Margaret has published her work in Spanish and English in professional and educational journals, as well as popular venues. Since the early 1980s, she has worked in support of farm workers' rights and has been a member of New World Agriculture and Ecology Group. At PAN, Margaret focused on environmental health and justice, particularly farm worker health and safety. In that capacity, she's going to be speaking today on behalf of the Equitable Food Initiative. So, Margaret.
So some of this you all saw earlier, but I'll give it a little more time and try not to rush through it. Actually, this comes very well following Tirso, because this is all of our presentations are good examples of the power of collaboration, the power of multi-stakeholder approaches, and building alliances among what might be otherwise strange bedfellows, and the power of importance of that. And that's why this Equitable Food Initiative that I'll talk about is actually, our vision is towards a new industry norm. And as I said earlier, and I'll start out by reminding us all that this spectrum of possibilities is from, I consider the Equitable Food Initiative, or EFI, as pushing up the bottom of industrial ag to bring it to a more just place. Whereas we look at the Agricultural Justice Project as, quite frankly, sort of the gold standard, or are demonstrating the ideal. So we're shifting the entire set of terms of debate, moving from getting the worst players up and demonstrating the power of really progressive relationships in production and marketing in agriculture. So I'm going to reiterate a little bit about the problems that we've heard about. Farm workers, lowest paid, least protected, amount of pesticides used in this country. The other issue that we haven't talked about in any detail here, but it's a fundamental piece of this because it brings some of the other players in a big way, is food safety. 48 million foodborne illnesses and 5,000 deaths each year in the U.S., with 85 food recalls since July 2009. It's probably been more since then. This is a huge issue for food retailers. And of course, the public is becoming very concerned about these issues, including the conditions of farm workers in food production, which has not always been on the top of consumers' list. Thank you. Here's another series of recent events that have brought this to the public attention. In December, there was an LA Times series, The Product of Mexico, which exposed a harsh reality in Mexico among farm workers there. Huge series, a very 5-part series. And then just very recently, tens of thousands, in fact, of farm workers in the San Quintin Valley in Mexico, Baja California, began a labor strike protesting low wages and work conditions. I don't know where that is right now. Maybe some of my comrades here do, but that's another big issue. So in other words, what we're addressing is not just in the U.S., very much also elsewhere. In the context of all of this, and after 5 decades of labor organizing, which has led to, frankly, not that many people not that many farm workers under contracts right now, for many political reasons and the systematic undermining of labor unions, we also are in this moment of a plethora of certification systems and labels, indicating huge potential for the marketplace engine to move how agriculture is done. Fair trade, safe salmon, safe forestry, marine stewardship, et cetera, et cetera. In this context, about 2009, the 3 major farm worker unions came together and said, what can we do that's different? Can we create a standard for industrial scale ag, where most of the farm workers are employed, that addresses some of these systemic problems? So that's UFW, FLOC, and PECUN up in Oregon. And together with Farm Worker Justice, National Farm Worker Ministry, and Oxfam, they came up with this idea of creating a marketplace standard to address labor issues and food safety and pesticide issues, and then they brought in the others of us. So this initiative from the very outset is a farm worker-led initiative. So they brought in Center for Science in the Public Interest, Consumer Federation of America to address the food safety issues, Pesticide Action Network to address the pesticide issues, and buyers and vendors. On board now are Costco Wholesale and Bon Appetit. And we've started with Andrew & Williamson, which is a large tomato and strawberry grower in California and Mexico, and recently added Nature Sweet and Keystone. To the board of directors, we have just incorporated as a 501c3 organization in California, from being a project incubated in Oxfam for its first 5 years or so. Briefly, the vision is that farm workers are empowered, and that's crucial, and we'll talk about that, and respected in a new food system that produces healthier, safer, more environmentally sustainable food. Growers and farm workers enjoy viable careers, so as AGP has also addressed the fact that farmers need to do well in the system, here too that is addressed. Retailers and food service companies realize the value inherent in greater assurance that safer food is being produced on farms that treat workers with dignity. And the term value is absolutely crucial here. If there's not a value proposition for all of the parties engaged, it won't fly. And then finally, consumers will enjoy safer food and receive assurances about the conditions in which it was produced. Here's just an example of the strange bedfellows. We've got on the left Eric Nicholson, Vice President of UFW, Jeff Lyons from Costco Wholesale, and Ernie Farley from Andrew & Williamson. Yes, they're all white males. The entire organization isn't only white males, so unfortunately that's not is the way I'd like to see it, but this represents the strange bedfellows because this initiative has been created from the beginning with all of these people at the table. The standard is one of the 2 key products the standard, and the training component that I'll talk about. These are the three pillars. Pest management, which I'll talk about in a little more detail, requires pesticide use reporting. Not a big deal in California, a huge deal in virtually every other state except Oregon and Washington. It's IPM based, which means that the pest control methods must use the legitimate ecological based pest control, not the industry usurped version of IPM. And in fact, the pest control advisors, if a grower has one, must be independent of the chemical companies. Sounds sort of logical. In California, probably about 80% of the pest control advisors who are making the decisions on the farms are actually employees of the chemical company. So that little thing that seems maybe insignificant is actually a huge step, that we require independence of the chemical company by the people who are making the decisions. And finally, it requires that every farm enters all of their pesticide use data into an online tool that actually generates an analysis of risk, quantification of risk to workers, and that can be part of the basis for deciding what is acceptable or not. And part of the reason that this is important, and we didn't come up with a specific list of prohibited pesticides, is because, well, there's a number of reasons, but you can apply multiple applications of a slightly less toxic pesticide. The ultimate level of toxicity to the worker could be greater than one single application of what would be considered a bad actor pesticide. So when you're talking about exposure to workers, it's very important about how much and when and where and how often the pesticides are sprayed, not just are they a particular bad actor pesticide or not. The labor components, as I said earlier, are essentially all of the elements of what you would see in a collective bargaining agreement, including the guarantee of freedom of association, but I won't go into the other details. Food safety is basically benchmarked to some of the other big indices like the GFSI, Global Food Safety Initiative. That's what the large growers are already doing, but it's all incorporated together. This is the other key piece. Leadership teams. Each EFI certified farm has to have a trained leadership team that has representation from all of the different jobs on the farm. And if deemed necessary, it also has to have gender representation. Perhaps it's country of origin, because if you're from Oaxaca, you don't feel represented by somebody from Michoacan, and that kind of thing. So on the farm, it's determined what is the legitimate representation of that group, of the workers and management. The growers pay for 40 hours of training to develop this leadership team, which has the capacity to do around the year problem solving to ensure that the farm attains and remains compliant with the standard. And this is just one little anecdote, great story about taking a group of farm workers from one of the farms to the Costco warehouse. And so the workers learn about quality control. For example, you stick a thermometer in the strawberry, and if the temperature has gone up too far, then that entire trailer gets rejected. So what that means to the workers is, oh, if my lunch break is supposed to happen right now, but I can delay it 10 minutes, the shipment doesn't get rejected. That means tens of thousands of dollars come to the farm instead of rejected. It's worth me delaying my lunch break a bit because it's going to come back to me in terms of benefit to the farm. Then the worker dumps the clamshell on the conveyor belt and packs it back up. And the Costco folks are amazed at the skill involved in putting those in. You try to dump out a clamshell and pack them up like that, you'll notice that it's not quite as easy as it looks like it should be. So it was just an incredible learning experience. Just one little anecdote there. The launch. So since 2009, we currently have 9 suppliers and about 15 contracts. We actually have now more than 2 certified farms. There are recently 2 or 3 more were added. Just last week, Costco put on its shelves the first EFI labeled product, A&W strawberries in California Costco's. I don't know how many. And that's the label right there that you will see. So I just wanted to And we can talk policy, and I would love to do that. I'll say one word, but after this. There's a couple things you can do today. In fact, on this front table, I mentioned this earlier as well. Chlorpyrifos is a horrible, nasty neurotoxic insecticide that was banned for use in homes in 2001, but is still used in massive quantities in agriculture, a clear double standard in which farm worker communities and farm workers are not deemed worthy of protection, whereas people in urban settings are. And so we have a petition here for people to sign, whether it's individuals, organizational representative for the organization, or healthcare providers, that is going to go to EPA very soon, because we're in the middle of yet another one of their regulatory processes. People can also support the EFI by just going on, Googling Take Part EFI, and there's actually a pledge that has now 36,000 people who have pledged to support EFI, which will be increasingly easier when we've got EFI product on the shelves. PAN is starting to develop, together with UFW and Farm Worker Justice, a campaign whereby we want to push more large-scale buyers to get on board with us. And then we've heard several times during this conference about the worker protection standard. Jeannie, who's in the back corner, mentioned that there is a petition that Earth Justice, in fact, she's waving it in her hand. Oh, the postcards that people can fill out in support of the worker protection standard work. Jeannie has been a phenomenal leader and facilitator in that process for the last 2 or 3 years. Another very well coordinated collaboration among many, many groups throughout the country, pushing EPA to improve its worker protection standard. And I just want to end with this inspirational photo. The gentleman on the right, you all probably recognize as Cesar Chavez. He, of course, is an inspiration to many of us. The gentleman on the left is a particular inspiration to me. This photo was taken in around 1979 or 77 when the Farm Labor Organizing Committee and UFW were at a convention signing something together. Ray Santiago was the Secretary-Treasurer of FLOC at the time, and he also happens to be my husband. So he's very inspirational. One of the things I mentioned about pesticide use reporting, which is a huge thing in our country, and only California and kind of Oregon and Washington have it. If all of the EFI growers are required to have pesticide use reporting, then all of a sudden we have a powerful engine that we've never had before to take to the policymakers and say, you can no longer tell us that growers can't afford to do this. Because look, we have a whole bunch of big growers that are doing it. And so we hope to, in fact, be able to leverage some of the progress, even though it appears much less progressive than what you see in the AJP, but imagine if you get a whole slew of big growers doing things like IPM and pesticide use reporting, we can use that to move some policy change at the state and federal level. So that's ultimately what we as PAN want to see out of some of our participation in this EFI project. Thank you.
We will have now at this moment for YAYA. Nataly Azcurra is recently graduated from the University of Central Florida with a bachelor's degree in anthropology, and she has been with YAYA since the fall of 2011. And Cristina Berrios is a student at the University of Central Florida studying health and sciences, and she's currently in the chair of the YAYA overseeing on the operations of the group activities and membership in Florida. So both of them are going to be presenting, so I leave them to you.
Hi everyone, like he said, I'm Nataly and this is Christina. We're with YAYA. It's the Youth and Young Adult Network of the National Farmworker Ministry, and our main thing is solidarity. So I looked up the definition of solidarity and sort of twisted it into my own. It's the feeling of unity and support between people. So what that means to YAYA and the National Farm Worker Ministry is providing, obviously, solidarity and support to different farm worker organizations and their campaigns. The ministry was started as the California Migrant Ministry back in the heyday, and then it sort of switched from a charity-based approach to a more working alongside approach, which is where the solidarity aspect of it came in. And here we have the National Farm Worker Ministry. This is from their website. We're a faith-based organization which supports farm workers as they organize for justice and empowerment. And we're going to discuss the different campaigns that YAYA and the ministry both support. Well, the organizations. The first one we have is United Farm Workers, which was started in 1962 by Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. The two campaigns they have right now is with Gurrowin Farms and Dairy Gold. Gurrowin has different produce that's harvested by the workers, and the negotiations are being made. They've been in the works for a while. And then Dairy Gold is obviously with dairy products in the western U.S., and that's their website if you feel inclined to learn more about them. And that's their flag if you've ever seen it. And then we do the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, which is a human rights organization, and it's in Immokalee in Southwest Florida, if anyone's familiar with that area. And the campaign they have is the Fair Food Campaign, which was started in 2001. Those are the different participating retailers with the campaign. It's supposed to promote worker-driven social responsibility, and they're currently focusing on Wendy's and Publix. So what they're asking is for the company to sign on to the agreement so that in the supply chain, the workers will end up being paid a penny more per pound. And these are the corporations which have already signed on to the agreement. So they're all pretty hefty organizations. So the fact that Wendy's and Publix won't sign on is a point of irkness for them. And next we have the Farm Labor Organizing Committee, which was a little bit discussed beforehand, and it was started in the 1960s in Ohio, and it's currently in North Carolina as well. Their current campaign is against RAI and RJ Reynolds. So RJ Reynolds is owned by Reynolds American Inc., which is RAI, and that company is owned by British American Tobacco, which is one of the largest tobacco companies in the world, with RAI being the second largest in the country. So they've been at this since 2006, and in 2012 they received notice that they're going to try to meet with Flock. They've still not met with them. Well, they're no written contract has been made as of yet, so that's still kind of up in the air depending on how you look at it, half empty, half full. But anywho, the union now has started a campaign to sign up more farm workers this past summer, and these are the contracts which have been achieved with Campbell's Soup, Heinz, and Mount Olive Pickles. And then we have the Farmworker Association of Florida, which was already talked about, so I'll just run through this one. It was started in 1983 and spread throughout the state later on. They have offices in Apopka, Fellsmere, Immokalee, Pearson, and Homestead. And they have a campaign to expand driver's license, and they have a variety of different programs like community gardens and toxic tours. And these are other organizations that YAYA also supports and works in collaboration with. We have the Alianza de Mujeres Activas, which is, we abbreviate it to AMA. They are in Volusia County, and they do different health initiatives within their community. We have the Hope Community Center in Apopka, and the Florida Immigrant Coalition, which has a network of different immigrant-based or immigrant rights-based organizations. Young American Dreamers, which is also part of the Florida Immigrant Coalition network, and they are in Polk County. And then we do work with Faith in Florida as well. And
okay. So like again, we are YAYA, the Youth and Young Adult Network of the National Farm Worker Ministry. So what we aim to do is work in solidarity with different farm worker-led organizations. So basically we're taking directions from these farm worker groups and campaigns, and take the lead from farm worker organizations while informing the general public through. So we do different things like film screenings, fundraisers, petitions, doing rallies. So for specifically each organization that we work in solidarity with, like the UFW, the United Farm Workers, what we do is different like e-action alerts and sharing communications. So we do like petitions through email. We also like host film screening events, like from the history of Cesar Chavez and the UFW. And so for the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, we're just encouraging participation among YAYA members for the annual encuentro hosted by the Student Farm Worker Alliance in Immokalee. Another thing that we do is during the springtime in March, there's a really big march that we try and like get just a lot of people to go in support of the Fair Food program that they have going on right now. We do like local presentations at universities, like at the University of Central Florida, Rollins College, phone banking. So the Farm Labor Organizing Committee like Nataly touched upon before. We participate in the annual R.J. Reynolds shareholder meeting, which is actually going on at the end of, or in May, sorry, held May every year in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And it's a good time for YAYA trainings and just to get together with different YAYA folks and to learn about the different things that are going on. We also do, there's the volunteer support at Flock's quadrennial Constitution Conventions in Raleigh, North Carolina, which provided a direct situation to actually meet with workers, as well as overseeing sales of merchandise at event, helping pack up supplies, presenting the opportunity to different YAYA members to participate in the AFL-CIO's summer internship program, which actually 2 YAYAs went last summer, and Nataly was actually one of them. And then with the Farmworker Association of Florida, we just provide different volunteering events for community gardens. We call YAYA members and we organize carpools to Fellsmere. So there we do like gardening, weeding, planting, anything that needs help in the garden. Not just, with Fellsmere, we also go to Homestead and Apopka, different posadas in Homestead, also in Fellsmere. Fellsmere also has the Agroecology Encuentro. And in Apopka, there's the Women to Women Conference, Solidarity's dinners, which actually recently just happened. And yeah, petition distribution for a variety of issues, most recently, which included environmental and the driver's license for all. And then other organizations, so we do just fundraising. We recently had a yearly soccer game that we do with AMA, the Aligencia Mujeres Activas. And so that was, we raise a decent amount of money with them with a matching grant that we have with the Funds for Democratic Communities, supporting FLIC through petitions, also going to the FLIC Congress, volunteer support, Focus was previously volunteered in assisting with the DACA clinics, and Posadas just collaborating with other organizations besides FOAF, to collect and donate toys as well as clothes for Posadas held in December on a yearly basis. And so the YAYA network structure, the way it was kind of traditional before in the sense we had like a president, vice president, treasurer, but now we kind of tried to do it more or less a collective approach. So we've adapted just kind of having just 2 co-chairs to oversee the organization and then having different representatives under it for each like organization that we work in solidarity with. And so, yeah, YAYA aims to utilize everyone's strength and not just to be inclusive, but to encourage discussions about our privilege. Does not cater to any specific prototype of what a leader is, and we encourage people to write blogs and shifting responsibilities so it doesn't all fall on one person. And yeah, that's the way YAYA works in solidarity with other organizations.
Okay, thank you. Leah Cohen is the program coordinator of the Agricultural Justice Project. Her experience with AJP began in 2004 with development of the verification system for certification as a consultant for quality certification services. Continuing with development of the certified training module and workshop that trained the Midwest Organic Service Association, MOSES. She has a MS in Human Geography from the University of Florida and a bachelor's degree in anthropology from Linfield College. From 2000 to 2001, Leah conducted research as a fellow of the World Agroforestry Center on the impact of illness on farming and fishing household livelihoods in rural western Kenya. From 2004 to 2009, she consulted on a monitoring and evaluation assignment for USAID Title II food security programs in Africa by AfriCare, the American Red Cross and Catholic Relief Services, and the Millennium Challenge Corporation, as well as serving as managing editor of the AfriCare Food Security Review. From 2009 to 2013, she led the Southern Sustainable Agricultural Research and Education Share Grant entitled Improving the Lives of Southern Organic Farmers and Farm Workers. So that's, without any further ado, Leah.
I have a PowerPoint that I'd love to show you, but I think I'm going to do it differently, actually. So can everybody stand up and get in a circle. Normally I do this with a ball of string, but I wasn't planning on doing this, so we're going to just use our imaginations. So what we're going to do is I have a ball of string, and I'm going to unravel it, and then I'm going to throw it across the room. And maybe because it's such a big room, it's better that we use our imaginations. And when you catch it, you're going to answer two questions. Well, actually, you can just answer one question. You're going to answer the question of, when you go to the grocery store, what is it that you use to decide between 2 jars of salsa, between 2, different oranges, between 2 products? What's the criteria that you use? You probably use a lot of different criteria, but you can just list one for now. Okay? So I'm going to start, and I'm going to throw my ball of string to you. And you can say your name first. Oh, no, this doesn't work. Okay. And now it does that one.
So we have to use our
Okay, so we'll use our imagination for that too. All right, bruised or damaged, so appearance. All right, now you can choose someone to throw yours to. Great. Next. Color. Mm-hmm. Next.
Money insurance, and I look for it as USDA organic.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Margaret, and I look for organic and origin.
Okay.
I look for whether or not there are artificial ingredients or nitrogen.
Okay.
Oh, I used to look at calories, I'm being honest, but now I do look at the USDA.
Okay. I think you caught it, Tirso.
I do what my community do is what is affordable,
Mhm.
more affordable. That's being realistic. I wish I should look for, something that has been, organic or sustainable. That includes not only organic, but that the farm workers are paid livable wages and have other rights like right to organize, etc. Things we believe on.
All right, you can throw it. Pick someone else.
I'm Christina, and so 2 things I look for when I'm choosing 2 pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Say maybe like the firmness, the touch of it.
Okay.
Oh.
Throw your ball of string.
And yeah, like Tirso said, I look for affordable products. I'm choosing between 2, 3, whatever. And for tea.
I usually look for organic and local.
Next.
I never was good at them. I look at whether or not it's fresh. I look at origin. I look at organic.
Okay.
Did you have it?
No. My husband does the shopping.
But you probably tell him things that you like or don't like, I suspect.
I actually, yeah, I everything's everything that everybody said, but also corn syrup is a big thing for me.
Next.
Well, it depends on the time of the month. Usually the price makes a difference, and then depending on what type of fruit or vegetable it is, whether it's organic, the price usually has a lot to do with it.
affordability. I can't afford it. I don't have the money.
Next.
Taste and
anyone hasn't been able to catch the string? Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I look for two things. Where it's been grown, and the other thing is if it's in season. Those are the things that I would do.
Great. Anyone else? Not
I look for freshness.
freshness.
And the time frame that it was grown in, and whether it's firm or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I watch the stem to see if it's too old or whatever.
Right. Anyone else?
I try to look for organic, but organic tortillas, I don't like that too much. and I try to spice other kind of peppers, but there aren't many organic peppers, so I just buy the peppers.
All right.
The spices.
Have you gone?
No.
Okay.
I just look for what's on sale.
What's on sale?
Usually. Sorry.
Anyone else left? Has everyone gone? All right. And I'll go. I have a whole host of things, but cost is a big one. It certainly isn't the only one. Now, everybody's holding the string still, so there's a huge spider web between us right now. And all of the answers that we gave are things that the food companies respond to. And so we should just keep that in mind when we go to the grocery store, because we have the power to influence them. A lot of people say corn syrup. Now you see a lot of labels, no corn syrup, no high fructose corn syrup. It takes a little bit of time, but it does happen. Now I want us to pretend like we're links in the food chain. This might be enough people. Maybe we need a few more. But the food chain is pretty complicated, so there's a lot of links. If I am, if I'm a buyer, and I decide that I can't pay that much to the grower, we're going to make it a fairly simple food chain for now, then I say, no, sorry, I can't really pay that much, so I'm going to pull my string. And that affects you. You now don't have as much string, right? Mm-hmm. Which means that you need to pull from the next part of the chain, which for you is the farm worker. So you have a choice to make. When I tell you I can't give you as much money for your product, now what do? What are your options? What are some of the options that she could do? Go home. What else?
She said farmer.
She's the farmer, not getting as much money at the farm gate. So the price I've paid to her is lower than what she needs.
Take from the workers.
Yeah. What else?
Find a different buyer.
Yeah. Any other ideas? Inputs, yeah. Cut back on your input costs. Yep.
She will begin to sell it directly to the community.
Well, that would be a good idea. Yeah.
Can I ask a clarification? Are we trying to say what does happen, or what we would like to see happen, or just the options?
What are your options? Yeah, I mean, there are lots of options, right? And then there's lots of reality. Yeah.
She will go to another country where she can pay less for labor and avoid some other regulations.
Yeah.
Like to Mexico, to Sinaloa, they're growing a fire, right?
Yeah.
China?
Yeah, so the point that I'm trying to make is that whatever we decide in the grocery store has a ripple effect all the way back up the chain, all the way to the farm workers. And so it's really easy. There are horrific conditions for farm workers in this country. Things that, I was talking about my experience at lunchtime. And I don't even have the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there are people in this conference and in this room who have had experiences that are mind-blowing. Yet, it's important to remember that it's there because the system supports it. And so we need to make a change in what we're doing, and we need to alter our consciousness about it in order for it to change. Because it's the same pressure that goes all the way back down the food chain.
Well, let's say the top guy charges higher prices, and he says he's going to pay it down to the bottom, but he doesn't. He keeps that extra money. I mean, he makes extra profit. So how do you make sure that he passes it down to that worker?
Yeah, well, I mean, certifications are one option for that, certainly, right. So you guys can sit down and I'll tell you briefly. I don't know how much time I actually have left, but I figured we needed a little break from the PowerPoint. We went to develop the standards. We took 4 years in the initial version of it and went around the country asking farmers and farm workers and other stakeholders in the food system what they thought should be in the standards. So what should the rules be, the promise, right? And it's a long list. You can go on our website, agriculturaljusticeproject.org. You can download the standards. You can see exactly what all the growers and all the food businesses have to comply with in order to be able to label their product. So things like the right to organize, which isn't protected for farmers in this country. It is for almost every other worker, but not for farm workers, not for domestic workers. There's a lot of pieces of inequities in the system that have resulted in the conditions that are in place right now. Fighting against those inequities and those disparities is the underlying philosophy of the Agricultural Justice Project. So for farm workers, a living wage, health and safety training, just being aware of what it is that is expected of them. So having transparency, having a written contract, your terms for employment, what it is that you need to do, what it is that you could get fired for or not fired for, having just cause for firing someone. These are all parts of the standard. But the baseline, where we started, based on the input we got from farm workers for a high bar standard, was to start with organic practices because they did not want to be exposed to toxic chemicals on a regular basis in their job. And so that's where we start, and then we built from there. We expanded the program because we recognized that farmers couldn't pay farm workers a living wage or have all these other pieces in place if they weren't getting a fair price. And we heard lots and lots of stories, and we had lots of experience with farmers, small farmers in this country, who have lost power due to consolidation of the food system into the power and the market share into the hands of just a few mega food corporations. So we looked at it and we said, all right, well, buyers can get certified. And if they get certified, it means they've paid a fair price to the farmer, that they've made that contract transparent, the terms transparent, they've paid them on time. That's very common that they don't get paid on time and they put out all this money up front. So they're already in the hole when they take the produce to the market. That they also have the right to organize, which isn't something that they have in this country either in practice. And a whole list of other things. Food chain workers throughout the system are exposed to and subjected to injustices, wage theft, and so we also expanded it to the retail, to the processing plants. So a retailer, a business, restaurant, grocery store can get certified, and when they get certified, it means that they've met the employment standards. So their own employees in the grocery store are paid fair wages, have health and safety training, the same standards on the farm. They also treat the farmers that they buy from fairly. So that's the certification program. It's relatively new that we launched. We launched in 2010 with Farmer Direct Co-op. You can get their products now in retail stores across the nation in the bulk bin aisle. Co-ops, local co-ops and grocery stores, and Whole Foods has it as well. But just to be clear, Whole Foods isn't participating. It's only Farmer Direct that's actually certified as fair farms. We also have farms in California, a couple of farms in California, Swantonberry and Pie Ranch, who are now Food Justice certified and selling into the market. We have a farm in New York State, and we have Green Star Co-op and a butcher shop in New York State as well as the Family Garden here in Florida that I mentioned before that's Food Justice certified. So we're growing. We have many in the pike. It takes a little while to get into the certification program, to get ready and to comply, but interest is growing and mounting. Let's see if I've forgotten something. How's my time? All right, I'm just going to end with, I'm going to end with one thing. two things. I'm going to just say that the verification system is very important because the promise is just a promise unless there's a way to verify it. And so having a third-party verification system is sort of the gold standard, and that's what we adopted, which many of the other programs have adopted as well that we're speaking here today. We also added a piece of the worker representatives, and so Florida Farm Workers, who's here today, Yolanda is a trained worker rep inspector that goes out with the certifier and interviews workers on the farms. She has done the farm in Florida. And we've trained about 7 worker organizations across the nation and about 5 certifiers. So I'd just like to end with the action items, which I mentioned before, but educating yourself on what's going on in your food system because you're so disconnected. We're all so disconnected. That's really important. And one of the ways that you can look into all these labels, Margaret had put up the labels, it's very confusing. What do they all mean? Is that there are now bodies that are going out and doing analysis of those labels. What do they mean? Because they aren't all necessarily transparent. Some are more transparent than others by design. So one place you can go is the Domestic Fair Trade Association has an assessment that they're doing of domestic fair market claims, and you can look at as little more general information, or you can get way down in the weeds and look at what they have determined to be the case against their principles for those programs. Get to know people that grow your food. That's the way that I feel like I've really gotten to know what's going on, what the pressures are and priorities are, is by getting to know the farm workers and the farmers. And everybody has a local farmers market at this point for the most part. I mean, they have exploded. And so there are ways for you to get in touch with people who grow food. Policy work, so supporting those organizations that do policy work. And when you make purchases in the grocery store, knowing that that you're voting with your dollar, and finally changing our perception of what the priorities should be in our food system. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank you all for being patient and disciplined in terms of just going through this whole process and not losing your attention. So I would like to entertain if you have questions or comments that you would like, with the only caveat, please be to the point and avoid trying to make speeches. All right? Yeah, John.
So this is for Margaret and Leah, and you started to address this towards the end.
Okay, the 3-part question about how the integrity of the different labels. How do you tell what keeps the industry from usurping standard for certification? Okay, so the most of these certification systems have a third-party certification body that verifies compliance with the published standard, and most of those certification bodies are or should be accredited by a body like ANSI. So there is that structure. Then one can, although it's not easy, look at actually the standard to which they are being certified. Or, as Leah pointed out, you can go to the Domestic Fair Trade Association, which values different standards based on those particular criteria about fair trade. Also, the Consumer Reports, or Consumer Union, but Consumer Reports recently put out a similar report evaluating various labels and standards. Last September, there was a Consumer Reports conference in San Francisco. There were several people there, and some of the growers actually said, I will have 2 or 3 or 4 labels on my product. That's not a problem. People will look for them if they choose to. So even for growers, sometimes having multiple labels, surprisingly, isn't a problem. Did you want to add to that?
I don't know that I need to add more to that, but I would like to just touch on rather than how can other people know, how can you know? So in a market claim, you could have nothing behind it. It could just be the words on the package, right? There could be no promise, no standards. There could be no verification. And you also don't know necessarily what it's applied to. So I would say if you're going to look into market claims, that you should pay attention to what's the promise, how is it verified, and what's the scope. And there's a whole lot more very technical aspects that I could get into. If you want to, you can approach me afterwards. But those are 3 areas that I think are really important in a claim. It does. But I have to say, we can't trust the industry to take that burden on for us. And so I think we have to take it back. You know, I think they've been in control, and it's not gone the way that we want.
So that's the challenge. So we have to take it back.
I've taken it back. I'm worried about it.
Yeah.
That's a step forward.
Yeah.
Yes.
And not just here, but in other workshops, I've heard a lot of, whether it's certifications or labels and such, of models that resemble unions and labor organizations and such. And I know that there's a decline in the labor movement and unionization as a whole, especially in the in the agricultural industry. But is there a concern that this type of movement, not by any organization here, but is somewhat co-opting or interfering in a way that is providing a hindrance for workers to organize and have their own voice in the process? And I guess, Margaret, your model had a particular voice with the leadership committees and such.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. One thing is that this particular initiative was actually led by 3 major farm worker unions who still support the collective bargaining agreement model and themselves are struggling internally with the idea of embracing an alternative to a collective bargaining agreement. So therefore, it seems like an obvious contradiction, internal contradiction. And in fact, it's difficult, you can imagine, for somebody at UFW to be telling some of its workers that we're doing something elsewhere that's not a collective bargaining agreement. That said, the transparency of what is in that standard that, as I said, and you can look to see, and you ought to be, for any standard, you ought to be able to look at the standard and see both what it is and what's the certification process and who's holding that responsibility and who's accountable. So you can see in that standard that it includes all the elements, basically, of a collective bargaining agreement.
I would like to add to Margaret, from the standpoint of our own reason why we participated and initiated the Agricultural Justice Project. At the center of it is the empowerment of the workers at the workplace. That's central to the theme of agricultural justice. So but then we are realizing that is put into a context, and the idea is so that eventually all these certifications programs, all these initiatives, all these criteria that is being set up is being to be driven by the power of the consumers. So it is a food change process that includes everyone, including consumers, and that's the eventual goal. And I believe that in terms of the 3 programs that we have presented today, that's a common theme across the board. Yes, ma'am.
My specific questions for you. One, is Prime available to everyone, and is there a cost to signing up for Prime?
The Prime tool is the online tool by the IPM Institute based in Madison, Wisconsin, that EFI growers are obligated to use. They enter their pesticide use data into that tool, and then they get generated a list of a quantification of the risk. It's available to anybody online. There is a fee for a user. It's pretty nominal, and there are great resources there for helping growers use that resource.
Question was about, you said in your discussion of the model for this new program that insect pest management strategies was a part of it, but that you wanted growers to move beyond just kind of like the really basic cutting down on pesticides, things like that, into deeper pest management strategies. Are you talking about like introducing beneficial insects and things like that, or what exactly are they?
The pest and crop management is an IPM strategy as defined by the practitioners of IPM that define it as ecological pest management, so not as industry defines IPM. But we keep using that language because there are a lot of IPM practitioners who are doing great work, and it's understandable and growers get it. But IPM is, by its legitimate definition, about crop and pest management to avoid pest problems in the first place, biological controls, cultural controls, mechanical controls, least toxic, and at the absolute last result, the other products, just as people have heard IPM described again and again.
Okay. Any other questions? Ma'am?
On the YAYA, is that, did you say that was 18 and over?
It's youth and young adult, but we take whatever we can get, basically.
And then, are those the children of the farm workers, or are those any youth?
It's any youth. Right now, YAYA is set in Orlando, so we're Central Florida. I mean, if you're the farm worker youth, you're more than welcome. But
because I know some colleges have students against sweatshops and they're just social justice groups.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if they jump on board.
We do collaborate with other student-led organizations, like from UCF or from Rollins, but YAYA as a whole, we're not affiliated with a school. So does that answer your? We're interfaith-based from the ministry, but there's no religious sort of mantra that YAYA follows.
It's ecumenical in the wide sense. Yes, a question?
So the question was one about, is there collaboration or infighting among groups that are doing apparently similar things? And that's one of the reasons that I started out saying that Agricultural Justice Project and the Equitable Food Initiative are complementary efforts, and we really, myself and Leah and Elizabeth Henderson, with whom I've presented several times, almost bend over backwards to say that we are complementary efforts. AJP being sort of the gold standard, small farm, organic, and EFI designed to focus at the industrial scale fresh produce production. We have not had, quite frankly, the same kind of collaborative discussions with Coalition of Immokalee Workers, although there has been some discussion, so I can't really speak to that. Obviously, there's some potential competition. It has not manifest itself to date, and I'll just leave it at that.
Just for the record, we have to thank Beyond Pesticides, because to my knowledge, this is the first time in this conference that the three programs have presented together. So Fair Food, the Fair Food, the AGP, and the FE initiative. This is the first time that the three initiatives presented. So that's it. That is significant.
Listen, I want to make a couple of comments. One is that the work we're doing with supporting the farm workers to grow their own food, it's out of the farm workers being able to afford to buy good, fresh, organic or sustainable food. So and because the farm workers and the migrants have a tradition of growing food which is sustainable in our own countries, they have a lot to contribute. Not only for themselves, but in this case, it's for themselves. So I wanted to connect that to the rest of the discussion. And the other thing is that, as I mentioned before, we are participating in the AJP and in the Domestic Fair Trade Association also. But related to the AJP, we even that we're not unionizing the farm workers. We had not tried that yet. We had tried other models of collective bargaining, which is the workers-owned cooperatives. So that model has worked for us. We think it can work you know, and if we ever have to organize, we might use the model. I mean, as an alternative to the unions. It functioned the same way. Actually, when we had done it, the corporate farms has confronted us in a real bad way, accusing us of organizing unions, which, you know, we were being very successful. And they just, you know, kind of stopped us from doing it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Yes, sir.
The farm bill, did they pass the new farm bill?
They did.
And did they have a provision in there for subsidies for organic farming like they do with traditional or conventional farming?
So the question is if in the farm bill there was provisions for funding subsidy or providing some funds for the promotion of organic. That is a whole set of discussion that goes beyond the scope. We understand that there was funding, but in a limited way. The issue is that in terms of organic, the USDA is in the process of redefining what is organic to include, expanding that definition and to include certain types of chemicals, pesticides, that are not considered to be organic.
A little bit more on the farm bill. The principal support for organic is in organic certification support. It's been cut, as have the other conservation programs. The conservation programs in general are also generally very good, or some of them are, in terms of support for sustainable agricultural practices. You got a lot of bang for the buck, though the bucks supporting the conservation programs have been decimated. Right now, Congress is in process of deciding appropriations or how much is going to be budgeted for those programs. So that'll influence organic, but it's not all organic, except for the organic certification supports and a little bit more.
Has the group ever got involved in politics and tried to elect your own people, like the mayor? We gave this talk from Miami, South Miami, where he said you guys got to get involved in politics and then you guys look for office.
Yeah, the Farmworker Association of Florida, one of the three mayor priorities in the current period of 5 years, it's civic participation. And yes, I mean, we have been doing work to encourage our people to vote, and that is tied up to the immigration work we're doing. So yes, I mean, our people, because the farm workers and the former farm workers, and you know, being in rural communities for a long time, we have been able to, you know, our communities now have. And the populations in the small rural towns has grown. We got towns that have majority Latinos, and sometimes the combination of Latinos and former farm workers, also African Americans, is the majority, very big majority. And yes, some changes has happened. We also understand much better now of the importance of having some influence on the local governments, because if, you know, it doesn't matter if things change at the federal level or the state level, if the local government doesn't allow for help to come, doesn't happen. So the local governments also have a lot of influence on what, you know, looking for improvements in the rural towns.
With that, I appreciate your patience and being here. So, and the panelists.